GearNetwork.com.
This is a Gear Network production.
You're listening to Better Live Than Dead.
Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome to BLTD 106, the Draftcast, as we've been calling it at this point. I'm Ryan Wolfe, at Wolfe BLTD, joined today by Brayton Wilson, at BJ Wilson WGR. We're here to talk all about the Buffalo Sabres, all about the NHL, and all about the upcoming expansion draft in just a couple of days. Right now, as of recording time, June 17th, we find out the expansion draft players on the 21st, and then the 23rd, we have the NHL Entry Level Draft. So there's a lot of stuff going on in these next couple of days. So I don't want to waste any time. I want to jump right into it. Brayton, I'm glad to have you, because at this point, I know you'll keep me. I know you'll keep me sane. You'll keep me grounded. You'll keep me centered, because at this point, despite being promised a ton of movement, we haven't really seen much. So it's kind of getting a little stir crazy over here in the tweet bots. I can see right now as we're just sitting here talking.
Yeah, I know. I keep refreshing everything because I really want something to happen, and it's just not happening, which is really unfortunate because, you would think that some teams would want to make some more moves to kind of make some room for other players, or maybe just make some moves just because, hey, we need an upgrade. But,
yeah.
The sense out there, it seems like that teams really want to get a feel for who's exposed, what the expansion or exposed lists look like. And then maybe after the expansion draft, things will heat up will heat up a lot, I should say. And then,
right now, the one thing I saw, I think it was Pierre LeBrun who mentioned it. It's a good point. No matter what, you're losing a player, so that you're already down one player. So a lot of teams may not want to go out and trade a guy, because if you trade player X for player Y, you're still going to lose player Y and Z. So, it's one of those things where teams may say, you know what, I think my personal thought behind it, and we can get to this in just a little bit, a little deeper, but my quick thought behind it is teams that need to move will make moves, but teams that don't need to, that may not be so up against it, like Buffalo. Buffalo may not feel like they're obligated to move right now, but when the unprotected list comes out and you see that, hey, Washington didn't protect a player we thought they would protect, maybe they're not so hot on him. Let's give a call at the draft and see if we can pry him away from Washington. So it's one of those things where I think that will be the case, but right now the biggest news we have at this point in time is Tobias Enstrom waiving his no trade clause that just happened. We've have a couple small deals, like Nick Cousins goes to Arizona, but nothing like what we thought we would get at this point in time, which makes it kind of frustrating, especially with the expansion draft trade deadline, if you will, only a couple hours away. So it's kind of disappointing, but then again, when it comes to trading deadlines in the NHL, if you're expecting a ton, you're probably the foolish one.
Right, and Toby Enstrom, his agent actually released a statement that Elliot Friedman just tweeted out, and he said that Enstrom has waived his no move as a favor to the Jets organization. He loves Winnipeg and the Jets and wants to stay. He thinks that the Jets has a bright future and wants to be part of the future success. Enstrom absolutely doesn't want to go to Vegas. So
actually,
that might be something interesting.
News just came across. We just see here Elliot Friedman tweeting out, Calgary and Arizona are working on a Mike Smith deal. Interesting. Huh. If Arizona can get out from under that deal, I don't think Mike Smith is going to be I know I'm going to mention this because it cracked me up. I listened to our friends over at Two in the Box, Chris and Tyler, and on their podcast, and the real Instigator podcast, the true Instigator podcast. And it cracked me up because the podcast started and they were talking about players available, and they mentioned Mike Smith, and Chris was very kind to Mike Smith. He first said Mike Smith is not good. And then he mentioned Mike Smith a little later and said Mike Smith is bad. And the last time he mentions Mike Smith, he said Mike Smith is terrible. So that reminded me of that. Cracked me up. But good stuff, guys. The podcast is great.
Yeah.
But I don't understand. I mean, I know Calgary needs a goaltender, but Mike Smith, I'm not sure.
They just keep getting goaltenders that are just like, oh, yeah, well, they had some successful years in the past. Then when they get to Calgary, it's just kind of like, they're doing okay, but, Calgary would be better if they had a goaltender that's playing at top of their game.
That's not the guy that take it to the next level. Well, hey, we'll let that kind of stew a little because we know how trades work in the NHL. We get a tweet, and then about 5 minutes later, we have the actual trade. So, let's start off with some Sabres stuff. Phil Housley officially hired as the head coach of the Buffalo Sabres. My opinion, that was the hire to make the entire time. Not necessarily because he's an ex-Sabre. I think this is more of yes, Nashville has phenomenal defensemen. But to hear how he's made those good defensemen greater, if you will, and you see how they play, I would have to say the defense, every defender on the Buffalo Sabres and in the Buffalo Sabres organization right now, just collectively, a gigantic breath of fresh air, just a gigantic sigh of relief. They're so happy to have this guy because not only is he a proven to be a great coach, but he just so happens to be a Hall of Fame defender. So he knows a thing or two about playing defense in the National Hockey League. So I think personally for me, that is a big, big, big thing for the defense. I know offensively the Sabres still need a ton of help. I think with coaches, with assistant coaches, we've heard rumors of Jack Capuano. That would be great. It may not last long because obviously an opening happens. Capuano is probably high up on the list for a lot of teams. But I certainly think this Phil Housley hiring on the surface was a complete slam dunk.
Yeah, and you see that how Nashville played in the playoffs and in the Stanley Cup final with not only their offense flying, but the defense into the zone, contributing offensively. I mean, if I'm correct, they had their top four guys all had 10+ points in the playoffs, which you don't see very often. It's kind of a new wave of how I think the NHL wants to be as a league that has the high-flying offense, but they have guys on defense like the four that are in Nashville right now that can not only contribute on offense but play solidly in the defensive end. So, and I think the Sabres have some good pieces on our blue line right now that can do that. And, I'll name four of them right now that, maybe not now, but maybe in the future can be guys that can be a top four. Those guys are Ristolainen, McCabe, Guhle, and Antipin. I think that those guys, and even Zach Bogosian you can throw in there because Bogosian's a really good skater. He has some offensive prowess. Problem is just he kind of just makes some dumb decisions in his own end. But, I think that if Phil Housley can shore up Buffalo's mistakes that they've had for the past 2 years on the blue line, and I think if he can get guys like Antipin and Guhle adjusted to the NHL game and get them playing on top of their level, I think that Buffalo's blue line all of a sudden looks pretty decent.
I mean, I like the fact that, again, it's different players, it's different stuff. At this point, I like the fact that, everybody's excited about it. It's not one of those things where, it'd be great if the Buffalo Sabres got a big name, the guy, but there was really no big name or the guy. Like I kind of lost track where I was going with that. I'm sorry, but like with Bilesma, he was the big name, he was the guy. This time it was Rick Tocchet, it was Phil Housley, Todd Reirden. Which with Todd Reirden, I'm kind of interested about that one because apparently they wouldn't let him talk. And you have I just completely went blank. The head coach of the Capitals right now, I just completely lost my train of thought. I'm just
Barry Trotz
right now. Barry Trotz, thank you. Barry Trotz's contract is up after next year, I believe, and they're not letting Reirden talk to anybody. So that's interesting. That's very interesting. It's kind of like a fail-safe in case something happens. They've got a replacement there. Like I said, hands down, Housley was the pick for me and for a lot of people too. But the cool thing is he's worked with Jake McCabe before. He knows Jake McCabe very well. If I'm not mistaken, he did very well at the World Juniors, won a gold medal, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to make sure I wasn't making that up because I thought that was the case. The thing is, it's been my brain. If everybody wants to kind of quick look inside of my brain right now, I'm like, my brain is very foggy. I'm finishing up. I'm almost done with this house. This house is almost done. Almost have it, only a few days away. But this literally has been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life right now, is buying this house. So it's very exciting, but it's also very difficult. So I'm trying to get my hockey brain working again. So please bear with me. I do appreciate it. But, Ristolainen's they'll find ways to make Ristolainen better, even though he's the biggest bust in the history of the hockey, NHL, in the hockey league, whatever the hell I'm trying to say. You've got, McCabe's already worked with him. Bogosian, I feel like we've said this before, Brayton, but I feel like We need to see a head coach. Coach Bogosian, play him to his strengths. Let him skate. Let him be the powerful skater that he is. Don't try to put him into a system because he's going to be terrible. Also, I really think, Brendan Gooley is going to be great because of this. Whoever, Victor Antipin, whoever they can fill the bottom half to, the bottom couple pairings with as well, very important. But no matter what, Phil Housley coming in, big move. I want to see the assistant coaches to see what they do. It's a good time. Again, we always say this, but it's a good time to be a Buffalo Sabre fan, to not only have an old player come back into the system, but to have an old player come back into the system who actually has some talent and might be able to do something with it. So that's very exciting. I'm very, very happy with that development, because you know what? Rick Tocchet may be a good guy, maybe a smart coach, but I was not sold. And
right.
Like I said, I'm just Botterill and Housley. It's a good 1-2 punch. Now go to work and see what you can do.
Right, and I think that with Phil Housley, I think that his style of coaching and the way that he coached that defense in Nashville, that's, again, as I said earlier, that's kind of the new wave that's coming into the NHL. You want to have those type of defensemen. Now, how will he kind of divvy up the responsibilities? It's uncertain at this point, but I certainly believe that Phil Housley has a plan. I think he's had a plan this entire time, which I think, made him obviously the number one candidate for Buffalo. And I think that, he is ready for this opportunity. And his track record shows that he's got a winning mentality, not only as a coach, but also as a player playing 21 years in the NHL and being a Hall of Famer. So I'm very excited for this. Again, not just because that, he's a former Sabre and let's relive the glory days, but I'm very excited for this because I think that Phil Housley is the next up-and-coming wave of these type of coaches where it's just like, yeah, well, while you want to have good offensive pieces, you have to have a solid defense. And the defense-first mentality that, Dan Bilesma and everybody else wanted to have, that's not the same thing as this defensive-first mentality with Phil Housley. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm ready for a different set of eyes. I think there's a lot of players on the Sabres that can be good, that can be better. And certainly I think that he'll be the guy that can help them out and push them to the next level, because we all saw how bad the defense was, almost historically bad these past couple of years. And, it's going to get better. It has to get better at this point. But
let's not forget, also, another thing about Housley that I think I really like a lot is that the players seem to really like him.
Yeah.
In Nashville, the defense thought the world of him. They thought that, he was really good with interacting with the players. The players really wanted to play for him, and they wanted to learn and listen to what he had to say because, again, he's a Hall of Famer. He's a Hall of Fame defenseman, and he knows the game. He plays a very similar style he played a similar style to kind of what needs to be today, where he was more of the offensive defenseman, but, he was reliable in his own end. He could skate really well, move the puck really well. And when he needed to contribute offensively, he would. And I think that, that kind of defenseman needs to come back in the NHL because, this isn't the game anymore where it's like you can have a 6'6", 240-pound defenseman on the blue line who's just in his own end the entire time, just throwing bodies around. That's not the NHL anymore. This is in 2004.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, the one thing too about him being an ex-player, and sorry about that, Brayton. I think the one thing about being an ex-player that's important is, and I know this always sounds kind of cliche, but he did make mention of his biggest strength being getting in the room and talking with the players, and having that experience and having that Hall of Fame experience. He may be able to say, I know what you're going through. I know it was a long time ago, but I can relate to that. I can push and I can see, what's going on and how you're struggling or what you may be doing wrong. Try this, try that, whatever it may be. So it adds an extra dimension to the locker room. And at this point, I'm all for it. Like I said, it's just, at this point we've been through the ringer. We've had, we've gone from Lindy Ruff to Ron Ralston to Ted Nolan to Dan Bilesma to now Phil Housley. So, at some point in time, it's got to give. Something's got to give. So I would have to think that this is the time where that happens. We'll move forward from there and we'll see. But I do want to continue to speak about the Sabres because there have been some pretty strong trade rumors that have been discussed these past couple days, past couple weeks. Evander Kane, the talks there have heated up again. And then Robin Lehner. some Robin Lehner trade rumors have also kind of sparked up and started to gain some momentum. So first off with Evander Kane, this is something that we've been keeping our eye on for probably, I gotta say 7 or 8 months now, because I mean, he's dynamic. He's a goal scorer. He's everything people want in the National Hockey League in a player in terms of on ice. Off the ice, I mean, we all know he's not a very good guy, but he's had some stumbles and some mix ups. But at this point, it's really about do the Buffalo Sabres want to invest long term in a guy who, first off, can't play a full season because his style of play is not, it's not that he can't play, it's that his body doesn't last because his style of play is not conducive to a full 82 game season. We've seen that. But he still scores, 25 goals in a season, so you take what you give and you take. But do you think that with Kane being on a 1-year deal, or at this point 1 year left on his contract, scores a ton of goals, is he more valuable to the Buffalo Sabres or as a player or as a piece to rebuild the Sabres?
I mean, that's tough because, I mean, you could find ways to say, well, yeah, he'd be a great future, asset here. Then there's other ways where it's just like, well, I mean, if you find the right deal, you find the right price, you can get yourself some nice assets if you decide to trade him before his contract is up. I mean, it's difficult because if he comes into the season and starts to play very well like he did last year and scoring 28, 29, even 30 goals, if he can hit that, he's on a contract year. So then you ask the next question, what's his next contract going to cost him? And I don't know if the Sabres can necessarily afford to sign Evander Kane to another deal like that because you got Sam Reinhart, you got Jack Eichel that you need to sign after this year. You've got other assets that you're going to want to bring in and get under contract. You don't want to be in a situation like Chicago is right now because Chicago, they are completely cap-stricken. They're trying to move one of their quote-unquote core players, and it seems like they can't find a deal or they can't swing a deal that will help them out because, I mean, they need to find somebody to get rid of in order to have more room because I think, if I read correctly or something like that, if they don't make any other roster moves or if they continue to make moves, they could be $4 million over the cap hit or something like that. Maybe that's a little blown out of proportion, but I mean, they're projected to be over the cap hit or over the cap this year, and that could be $75 million. I think that's what the cap is. So maybe that changes, based on the article that I wrote. I can't remember, but I mean, it's incredible that the Blackhawks. I mean, you don't want to end up like the Blackhawks. You don't want to end up with guys that are major contracts. And then you've got young players that you want to keep. They're playing really well, but then all of a sudden it's just like, well, we can't keep them. We got to do something with them. So I guess we can trade them and get more assets and see what happens. But, I mean, for the Sabres, it's tough because I really like Evander Kane's play. I really like his game. His off-ice issues, I don't think necessarily he's a bad guy. I just think that he just makes some terrible life decisions. So, if he could clean up his life decisions, if he could clean himself up off the ice, then, fine. I'd be fine with bringing him back, and depending on the cap hit, of course. But, I mean, as of right now, I'm probably more 70-30 on the side of trade Kane as soon as you can and get for as much as you can for him because, you can't let this go to the trade deadline. You can't let this go beyond and into next season and then let him walk if you don't decide to trade him.
I mean, I like what you said, the idea that you pointed out. I'm sitting here looking at capfriendly.com right now, and I mean, at this point in time to kind of show you, to kind of tell you where the Buffalo Sabres stand, they have a ton of players that they have to sign next year. I mean, you've got, just going down the list, Evander Kane's a UFA, CJ Smith, Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, Sean Malone, William Carrier, all RFAs. Delorier's a UFA. I mean, you're not re-signing Georges, Justin Falk maybe, but then you go to Rochester and you look at Hudson Fasching, Victor Antipin, Nick Baptiste, Justin Bailey, Casey Nelson, all restricted free agents. So there's going to be a lot more money added to that cap, and that's gonna fill up real quick, especially when you're signing. You're probably going to sign Eichel to a long-term deal. I mean, you're probably going to try to get. I mean, Reinhardt's probably going to be a bridge deal. Eichel's probably going to be the maximum long-term deal, but. I mean, it's going to get real close real quick, and it's not going to be one of those things where you're going to want to have, you're just not going to want to get yourself up to that cap so fast. I mean, Chicago can do it because Chicago has the pull where they say, we'll go out and trade Teuvo Teravainen because we have, a guy who's just as good, if not better, who we're going to sign from college or whatever. But the teams like the Sabres don't have that ability, so they have to sit here and make these. Yeah, they got to make these crazy decisions to say, Evander Kane was fantastic last season, but now we have to trade him and try to get better, try to diversify the portfolio, if you will, diversify your assets. And I certainly think that you can take Kane and turn him into like our buddy Chris and Tyler, like I said, they pointed out, because it's fresh in my brain because I just listened to it yesterday. But they made a mention like trade him to LA and go out and trade and get a third or fourth defenseman and picks, and then take your picks plus the LA pick and turn it into either a top 2 or top 3 defenseman, or top pairing or second pairing defenseman, or go out and get another forward. Because you look at, depending on, I would have to think Alex Nylander maybe has a shot to break camp with the Sabres, but then again, you see Jason Botterill's the GM, and you see what Jason Botterill has done in Pittsburgh, and they let people hang out, and they let people kind of to stew a little and get very, very, very ready for the NHL. So there's no seam in the transition there, but it's tough because if you trade Evander Kane, you're losing a ton of goals, you're losing a ton of offense, but like you said, you can't let him walk for nothing. Especially being Buffalo, you can't let him go for just hey, he scored 20 goals for us this year, and now we're gonna let him walk. You can't do that.
And just imagine what happens if he's going to score 30 goals next year. Let's say that he ups the number of goals, and let's say he plays 75 games instead of 70 next year. Let's say that he just has a couple of bumps and bruises. This is a few games here and there, and then plays almost a full season and scores 30, 35 goals. He's going to want a big payday. It's not going to be $7 million. He's going to want Ryan O'Reilly type of money, $7.5 million. And depending on how many goals he scores and what kind of production he puts up, he might ask for more. How much more can the Sabres afford? Especially with the lack, with the lack of depth. If you're going to have a situation like Chicago, you're in trouble. You're not a franchise that has an established core as of yet. You've got guys like Eichel and O'Reilly, but aside from that, you've got a lot of unknown pieces to the puzzle. You got to find those pieces to the puzzle. You got to find the team that you want to establish. And I just think that, it's difficult because Kane's a great player, but are you really willing to pay him that much money to stick around long term with the uncertainties, with his off-ice issues and with his injury issues? It just, like, the writing on the wall for me is, you want to keep him, but you may not be able to keep him just because of your situation right now.
Yeah, I think that real quick, and we can move over to Robin Lehner. But I think with the way Jason Botterill helped build the roster in Pittsburgh, and how they've built the roster in Pittsburgh, you have to build your team around Reinhart, around Eichel, around O'Reilly and Oposo, and then everybody else, they're interchangeable. Because they have a lot of good players in Pittsburgh, but at the end of the day, it really is Crosby, Malkin, and everybody else. They have Kessel, they have Hornquist, they've made it work out, but they have a way where they can interchange the bottom parts where Buffalo doesn't have that depth. Buffalo needs to build that depth back up. The easiest way to build that depth back up is to, like I said, diversify your assets. And that's a $20 word, it feels like, instead of a $5 word. It makes me feel pretty smart when I say that. But I would have to say, I don't think he gets traded before the expansion draft because, again, if as we mentioned a few minutes ago, you trade a player, you're going to lose a player, and then you'll still lose another player because you have to protect Kane and not someone else. But I also think it's just going to be more feasible to make it happen at the draft or after the draft. But real quick on Lehner, because for me, Lehner that's a no-go. That's a non-starter for me right now because at this point, Linus Ullmark is going to be your backup. I would have to assume Buffalo's worked something out where they say, don't take Ullmark, take player X or Y or Z. We'll give you something. Don't take Ullmark. You figure Ullmark's probably the backup. Lehner would be your starter. There's nobody out there that can replace Robin Lehner. That is going to be, because I know Robin Lehner off ice has done some things and has kind of pissed people off with his stances. And I'm certainly not, I could consider myself one of them. I don't like the way that, who he supports or how he feels about things, but it's sports athletes. They're all terrible at the end of the day. Most of them are. I certainly think that Robin Lehner had a pretty damn good year last year, and I would be willing to bet money on it that he'll have just as good of a year next year. And can you replace that production for relatively cheap or at no cost at all in terms of trading people? I don't think that guy's out there in free agency, and I think if you want to get that guy in a trade, it's not gonna be worth it.
Yeah, then I mean, again, you look at Robin Lehner's situation and you say to yourself, well, you got to have the right trade and the right pieces coming back in order to say, I'm trading Robin Lehner. Because you're right, the free agent market is not good. I mean, you've got Cal Peterson out there still, and you hope to get him signed. But then again, Cal Peterson's not an NHL starter right now. He's not even an NHL player right now. He needs to develop in the AHL. And if, let's say, the Blackhawks decide, oh, we're going to sign Cal Peterson and put him in the AHL, I think they're just rushing his development, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But then again, I mean, Chicago's done this before. I mean, they or not necessarily rushed development before, but I mean, they're a veteran of let's have some guys develop in the AHL right away, and then if everything goes well, they'll come up into the NHL. So, I mean, with Robin Lehner, I say it's more likely that he stays than he gets traded or what have you. I mean, I think that, you know, he'll be re-signed, maybe a 1-2 year deal until that right guy comes into the picture. And I mean, I think that's kind of what Cal Peterson's doing too, is he's just kind of seeing what the situation in Buffalo is looking like. I mean, that starting goaltender spot in Rochester is wide open right now, and I mean, that's pretty much the plan. Is he signs, he's going to come to Buffalo, he's going to go to Rochester, and he's going to play in Rochester for at least first year or two of his career. But
he could be fast tracked. I mean, if he crushes in Rochester and wants to play great, and something happens in Buffalo or someone struggles in Buffalo, there's not to say that he couldn't be fast tracked. Oh, yeah. But it's one of those things where you got to be willing to take the risk.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Robin Lehner is not going to be traded. I think that he's going to be here. I think that he will get a new deal. Again, not much, but then again, how much are you going to pay him? That's another thing. It's just like, are you going to give him the same money that he made from before, or is it going to be quite substantial, the type of raise? I don't think it's going to be quite substantial, but I think there's a chance that, you know, he could get a significant amount of money in his next deal. Again, it's probably just a 1-2 year deal, but I mean, and again, I'm comfortable with Lehner. I feel like I'm comfortable, and I thought he played really well last year. I thought that he stepped up his game, and you know, he didn't get injured, so that's another positive thing.
Yeah, if he can put another season together, another decent season together where he doesn't get hurt or doesn't miss a ton of games, then it's going to be, you know, we can kind of put that injury prone moniker in the back seat for a little while. I mean, because no matter what, at this point, it's attached to him. But if he can go 2 straight years being fine, I think the Sabres will be okay. Plus, you know what? If he struggles, Linus Ullmark is going to have an opportunity this year to prove. I mean, he's not a full-time starter in the National Hockey League, but the more he plays in the National Hockey League, the more he will find out what his strengths, what his weaknesses are, and then they'll work on that.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I feel like I've been rambling on here for a while, but it's certainly going to look like that. Linus Ullmark is the backup. He's earned it. He played really well in Rochester last year, and he's earned the right to be the backup up here.
I mean, it feels like rambling because it's the same. I mean, we hear the same thing all the time. You know, people want to trade Lehner. People want to trade Kane. At this point, you know, Lehner's probably not going anywhere. Kane most likely is going somewhere. I mean, was it Bob McKenzie or Darren Dreger who said 100% that Kane gets traded? Like, it's these people don't mess around. Like that's if they're reporting that, it's pretty damn near going to happen.
Yeah, I can't remember who exactly it was that said that, but yeah, I mean, it certainly seems like that. The interest in Kane is not exactly all there, but I mean, there is interest, and you know, it's not like people are flooding to the Sabres phone lines with, "Hey, we want to trade for Evander Kane." I think it's just, you know, hey, you know, Evander Kane's available. You know, whoever wants him can call and give your price, but. I mean, I think, it's just more likely that Robin Lehner is going to stay and Evander Kane is likely going to be on the move.
Yeah. Now, let's jump over to the expansion draft real quick before we wrap this podcast up. Expansion draft is a couple days away. 1, do you expect any surprises out of Buffalo? And then 2, at the end of the day, who do you think is essentially the Buffalo Sabres representative in Las Vegas?
I mean, I feel like there's not really going to be any surprises. I mean, I think the only surprise might be is if Zemgus Girgensons and or Johan Larsson are left unprotected. I have a feeling that both of those guys will be protected. I think that guys like Tyler Ennis, Matt Moulson will be left unprotected, even though, you heard Phil Housley in the press conference say, those guys are good. But then again, I mean, he might have just been saying that. Who knows why? But overall, I think it's going to be Tyler Ennis that's going to be going to Las Vegas. I think that, he's the guy that is the most likely to go. His cap hit, yeah, I mean, it's a little pricey, but Vegas has room. They have room to add a piece like him. I think he's only got maybe I can't remember off the top of my head, maybe 2 years left on his deal, and his current deal right now.
2019.
Yes. So I think Vegas would be willing to take that kind of risk with a guy like Tyler Ennis. I know that he's been hurt and he hasn't been playing at his level of game, but I mean, I'm telling you what, if they land him and he manages to find his game again, and he's playing at the level he was before with all of his concussions and everything, man, I mean, Vegas is going to pick up one hell of a player. But, right now, I just think that Matt Moulson's contract is too much of a cap hit. Not only that, but if they wanted to, maybe move on from him after this year, that would just be almost impossible. It's obviously possible, but the cap hit and the ramifications of buying his contract out is just ridiculous. So, I think that Ennis is the guy. If not Ennis, maybe Linus Ullmark, because they could always use some depth goaltending, and Linus Ullmark last year proved that he's a capable starter in the AHL, so they need goaltending, and they really want a guy that can kind of settle things down in the AHL, and that Linus Ullmark would be a good option. So, I mean, I think Ennis is the favorable one, and then a couple of other guys would be, I'm blanking here. Linus Ullmark, or, if Johan Larsson or Zemgus Girgensons are left unprotected, then maybe they get gone too.
I mean, I would have to think that they would protect a guy like Will Carrier. I know that Cap Friendly predicts that he'll be left unprotected. I mean, that's a body right there that could be very intriguing to Las Vegas. But I think at the end of the day, it's either got to be Moulson or Ennis, because you can't let a guy like Carrier go. You can't let a guy like Linus Ullmark go. You got to make some sort of deal. And I think that would be the biggest surprise for me, to hear what kind of deal they have to stretch to get, Moulson gone or Ennis gone. Because at this point, if Ennis goes, it's 4.6 for next season, and then he's a free agent. And you got 2017, 2018. So yeah, that's next season. Sorry, they've already updated this website. You got 2 seasons at 4.6 or 2 seasons at 5 each for Moulson or for Ennis, respectively, both UFAs after the 2018-2019 season. So those are the kind of deals. If you see Vegas take on high-priced talent, it's going to be guys like Moulson or Ennis who are high-priced, but they've only got a couple years left. So it's one of those things where they can go out and pick high-priced guys to fill hit the cap floor, and then go out and pick a bunch of talented young kids to fill up the system so they can develop really fast and replace those guys out when the contracts are up or when they decide to trade them. So, I mean, like you said, if Ennis is more attractive in my opinion, just because he has that upside. I mean, Matt Moulson was great in the power play last year, but it does look like the game has passed him by in just terms of, at least in Dan Bilesma's system, his speed was too slow for Dan Bilesma's system, and that says a lot because Dan Bilesma's system wasn't really based in speed. But like I said, I would be shocked if the Sabres let Linus Ullmark get to Vegas. Just because the Sabres goaltending depth is already terrible as it is. I mean, they have Jonas Johansson and they have Jason Kasdorf if they let Linus Ullmark go. I mean, they'll probably if Cal Peterson doesn't sign in Rochester, or just doesn't sign with Buffalo to play in Rochester. I mean, Buffalo's got to go out and try to acquire a goaltender somewhere just to fill the system out, because we know Jason Kasdorf is not very good.
No.
But with that being said, I'm not expecting too many surprises out of Buffalo. I mean, you'd expect more surprises out of teams that are actually up against it, like Anaheim or Minnesota. But with Buffalo, they aren't really too much against the wall. They kind of have some wiggle room. So like I said, Moulson or Ennis, I mean, worst case, it's Linus Ullmark, which may not be the worst. But then again, you kind of don't want to see a young talent like him go. But last thing before we go, because I know that I know, Brayton, you pride yourself on this. The NFL draft, what am I talking about? The NHL draft is also next week, as mentioned. I'll just ask you real quick, in kind of a chamber here. What do you think the Sabres go? Where do you think they go at 8? Who's going to be the pick in your opinion, or what will they do with that pick at 8?
Well, I mean, I've got a mock draft coming up later on this week, shortly before the draft happens. It'll be available at WGR550.com. But so I don't want to give anything away with that. I don't want to give away who I think the Sabres will be picking. And who knows, it might change leading up to the draft, depending on what kind of moves they're making. So
I appreciate the hustle. I do appreciate the hustle. I'll ask you this. I'll ask you with this, and I'll tone it down a little. I'll calm down on my end. Are they going to go? Do you think they'll go offense, defense, or trade?
I think whoever the best player available is at 8 is who they take, and whoever they may think the best player available is will differ because I mean we'll all think that this guy's best player available, this guy's best player available, but then they'll see it as another way. And I think honestly that I think the top 4 players that could be available for the Sabres that would be there are guys like Owen Tippett, even a guy like Michael Rasmussen and Casey Middlestat, and then right after that, it's probably one of the two of Heiskanen or Makar. I think Makar would have the more likely chance to be available, but even then, if not one of those guys, if none of those guys are available, then I think the Sabres will go best player available with defense, and they'll probably take a guy like Timothy Liljegren. But either way, I think the Sabres are in a decent spot. I think they're in a pretty good spot, and I have a feeling that Sabres will kind of wait things out. They'll sit it out, and then really, if they feel uncomfortable with who they are, then maybe they take a trade. But I wouldn't expect that they're going to make a trade out of 7. I think that they stay where they are. I think they kind of let the pieces fall into place, and then when they hit 8, they'll probably just look at the board and say, okay, who's the best player available, and then they'll take that guy. And honestly, there's a few people that wouldn't be surprised if we expected them to take right up there, and then they fall to the Sabres at 8. But who knows?
Yeah, I like that. That's a good way to put it. I mean, it seems to me like that's where the Buffalo Sabres want to go at this point, just best player available. Like last year, I mean, they went best player available with Nylander, and it should work out for him. So, and
you look at this year's draft board, and you see guys like Casey Middlestat and Gabe Vilardi and Michael Rasmussen and Owen Tippett. I've seen mock drafts where, a guy like Casey Middlestat goes 3 overall to Dallas. And then I've seen mock drafts where he falls as far as 10th to the Florida Panthers, which is just crazy. But,
like you said, at the end of the day, if they get to 8 and, they say, yeah, we like whoever at this pick, but we could get him at 12. We know we'll be able to get him at 12. So we'll trade back or we'll trade down or we'll trade the pick away. So it's the draft is always interesting. It's always kind of a minefield to work. We know that. So like Brayton said, check out WGR550.com later this week for that mock draft. You'll be able to see who he predicted. And then actually sometime next week, probably I would say next Saturday or probably on Sunday, we will discuss in the post-draft cast, BLTD 107 post-draft cast, we'll talk about the expansion draft, surprises with the expansion draft. That we can kind of be more expansive with the expansion draft at that point, no pun intended, but because we'll know who's in Vegas, who's going to play. We'll know I'm assuming most of the trades, most of the post trades will be done by then because we know Vegas will probably select some players. You'll scratch your head and say, why the hell would they want that guy? And then Vegas will turn that player to another team for something different. And that'll be who they really wanted. So, whole lot of stuff going on. That podcast might be just a little longer, but and more NHL centric than Sabre centric. But hey, maybe in the coming days we'll have some Buffalo Sabres news to talk about. And by then too, you know what? Maybe my head will be a little more clear and I can actually think straight. So, Brayton, as always, I appreciate you joining me. Appreciate you talking hockey. It's always a blast.
Well, thanks for having me on as always.
And hey, you know what? Maybe the new BLTD Studios, BLTD Studio 3.0 will be done relatively soon. We can get together. We can hang out on the couch in the basement. We can talk some hockey. We can talk some sports and just chill out.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to the new BLTD studio to be done and ready to go.
And more pizza.
And more pizza for sure. Yeah.
Good for my brand. Hashtag branding. That is goddamn right. Hey, as usual, we are better live than dead.
And you are not.
We'll catch you sometime soon. Thanks again, friends, for tuning in. And hey, real quick, not only do I want to say you can, because I forgot to mention this at the start, you can hear us on Google Play Music, I think it is. You can hear us on the Apple iTunes. You can hear us on iTunes on the podcasting app, whatever. You can hear Spreaker.com, GearNetwork.com, but also now you can listen to us through the Buffalo Sports Network, BSN716.com. Check us out. Check that out. Make sure you follow them on Twitter at BSN716. And we appreciate it. However you listen to us, we certainly appreciate you. I want to thank you again for tuning in, and we'll talk to you very soon. Hey, everybody. You couldn't get rid of us that easy. The Buffalo Sabres decided right after the podcast that they wanted to make a trade. They acquired Nathan Beaulieu from the Montreal Canadiens for the 2017 third-round pick, which I believe is 68th overall. Now, Twitter is abuzz right now with discussion here, and apparently it does look like the Buffalo Sabres have made a good deal, shockingly. Maybe Jason Botterill knows what he's doing. Nathan Beaulieu is playing predominantly as a third-pair defenseman, which is really what the Buffalo Sabres need. He was protected by Montreal, so you have to wonder if Buffalo would do the same, especially going out to make a trade for him. But with that being said, does a guy like Bogosian maybe go unprotected because you've acquired Beaulieu? We don't know. But Brayton, what are your thoughts on this real quick, just on the surface?
Looking at some of the numbers, the advanced numbers, it seems like, that when he's on the ice, the Sabres play, or the Canadiens played a little better. They got a little more production when he was on the ice. Watching him in person, I was never really impressed, just because, he's a guy that I really never thought was flashy or anything like that. Maybe that's the type of defenseman he is. I don't really know much about Nathan Beaulieu except the fact that he was a former first-round pick, I believe in 2011, and he put up his best career year this past year with Montreal. So, I believe that he knows that Jason Botterill knows what he's doing. He scored. Let's see here. Nope, I got the wrong page here. I'm trying to do this on the fly here. So.
Yeah, I think we all are. We're just sitting over here just chewing away at our keyboards at this point.
Yeah, but Nathan Beaulieu, if he can fit in with the Sabres and what they want to do, then by all means, I'm happy with this move, and I think that, it would be a benefit for the Sabres. But 2011, 17th overall pick in the draft, and this last year he put up 28 points, 4 goals, 24 assists in 74 games. So, he's a guy that seems like he can stay relatively high. I'm trying to look up his career stats now just so I don't get crossed.
Just while you're looking it up, Tyler Dello tweets out that he says, I had Buffalo as one of the teams that could realistically go four forward, 4 defensemen, and they don't have a ton of D worth protecting, so I like this move, he says. So I certainly think the Sabres will stay 7-3-1 just because if you go 4-4, you've got O'Reilly, Oposo, Kane, and Foligno that you probably would protect, leaving Larson, Gergensons, Ennis, Molson, Carrier, all available. So 7-3-1 still seems like the way to go. But if you're just looking, at the Buffalo Sabres right now, let me try to get something popped up here.
And the reaction on Twitter I'm getting is like, it's a good, the Sabres only gave up a 3rd-round deal, which is pretty good. Let's see.
Yeah, Dmitry Filipich, I believe is how I pronounce his name. Sorry if I didn't do that on Twitter. He tells us, getting the 68th overall pick in return for one of your better defensemen when you're a win-now team who needs more defense is strange. So, people calling it poor asset management.
Darren Dreger just tweeted out in reaction to Connor McKenna, who is a host on TSN 690 in Montreal. He said, that's a horrible deal. And Dreger said, has to be another deal coming. So maybe there's more, but we'll see.
Right now, you're without Georges, you're without Kulikov, you're without Franzen. So maybe you place you put maybe McCabe, Ristolainen. This is just a total crapshoot right now, but just off the top of my head, McCabe, Ristolainen, Antipin, Bogosian. You'll have, with people under contract right now, it would probably be Beaulieu and Georges.
Here, LeBron just tweeted out that Nathan Beaulieu's skating ability should fit in well with how Phil Housley want Sabres to play. Good spot for him. So, perfect. Okay.
So, hey, everything's going good. Everything's fine. And guess what? The biggest news out of this all, Brayton. The biggest news out of this all. Not only did the Sabres make a trade, but guess what?
They got a defenseman.
They got a defenseman, but guess what else?
Bogosian's going to be exposed.
That's another thing. You're knocking them off. The other thing. One more thing.
Go ahead.
They didn't trade Sam Reinhart.
That is true.
So you know what? You know what? I'm assuming Galchenyuk is going to be moved, and then they'll take that guy they get for Galchenyuk and protect him, which makes Beaulieu available. But damn, this is a nice deal for the Buffalo Sabres. So hey, we'll be back next.
As you listen to this, wherever you are, Bob McKenzie just tweeted out confirming Calgary and Arizona have agreed in terms to trade Mike Smith. And so that means Mike Smith will be going to the Calgary Flames, which to me is just like oh boy, here we go again, another terrible goaltender trade for the Calgary Flames.
And someone will think that Calgary is going to make a deep run, and they probably won't because Mike Smith is not great. So that being said,
and a lot of national media and a lot of people from Montreal are saying that this trade that Buffalo just made with them is terrible indeed for the Canadians. You got a third-round pick for Julio?
Yeah, we'll have to see what they do with Galchenyuk, but I would have to think that Galchenyuk is set to go here shortly. It's like the trade deadline. The Sabres make another small move, and shockingly, that's what they do. So I'm going to go crack a beer. I'm going to go get myself a Heller High watermelon, and a nice beautiful beer. I'm going to sit on my porch. Chris Baker tweets out, sorry, just one more thing. He says, years after being in Buffalo for a pre-draft visit in 2011, left-hand defenseman Beaulieu brings size, mobility to the Sabres D, a solid opportunity for him. So, hey, we'll take it. But like I said, I appreciate you, man, for joining us.
I have to do my scouting report now on Nathan Beaulieu.
You got to go do some work, and I'm going to go drink some beer. So. You have a good one, my friend. Hey, everybody, thanks for tuning in. If anything else happens, we'll jump in. But I think after this, we're just gonna call it a podcast and hope nothing else crazy happens. Thanks for tuning in.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.